Sick of charging problems with your RZR? RMStator has the solution. Hey, I'm Evan, Head of Engineering for RMStator. Today we're going to be showing you how to install a charging system on your RZR. We're going to be showing you how to install a new stator, which I have one right here, as well as a gasket for the side cover, which is always a great idea to change on these cars. And we're going to show you how to install a new voltage regulator as well. So these will apply to just changing out original parts on your car. We're also going to show you how to remove the flywheel when we have the stator cover off, which isn't generally necessary to replace, but it's easy to show you at the same time. So we're showing you specifically on a 2015 RZR 900S two-seater. These steps will apply to most of the larger engine RZRs, really specifically to the 900 and the 1000 motor. And you know, if you've had a RZR long enough, you've probably had a stator or a regulator failure. It's pretty common on these, so we want to make sure that you can see how to do it and change these parts easily. You can totally do it at home and do it yourself. It's not difficult. We're going to show you how to do it where you don't have to drain the oil at all. You can actually change your stator and flywheel and whatever you need under the side cover very easily without draining the oil. We're going to jack the car up really high in the air using an engine hoist so we can get clear shots showing you how to do this. But it's not necessary at all. You can use a jack in your garage and just lift up the back passenger side corner and kind of tilt the car a little bit, and you won't have to drain any oil, and you can easily do this swap. So the first thing we're going to show you is unplugging the stator connector. We need to disconnect the stator from the wiring harness, and on the two-seater models it's behind an access panel behind the seats here. So we're going to get it prepped and show you how to do that. On the four-seat models it's similar. There's an access panel behind the rear seats, so you may have to look around a little bit. The process might be slightly different on a four-seater or a different year. The connector might be in a slightly different location, but these steps are going to be pretty universal for a RZR, so I think you'll be able to figure it out even if you don't have the exact same car that we have here. So we're going to go ahead and set it up here to show you the shot for the stator connector. We're going to have the seats out of the way and the access panel open, and we'll show you where the connector is and how to disconnect it. Okay, so we have our seats removed and we have the back access panel cover off. This is the cover you remove if you're checking your oil or changing your oil filter. So this shot is really difficult to see. We tried to light it as best we could, but I'm gonna just have to describe it here, and hopefully Chris can get it zoomed in enough to see the edge of the connector. On this two-seater model, the stator connector is actually, for the wiring harness on the vehicle, is attached to the bottom of a cross-member frame rail, and the stator connector plugs right into it. You might be able to just see it here in the corner. I'm going to try. Oh, my hand's going to block the shot too much. So it is straight down there. You might have to fish around a little bit. You might have to have somebody help you trace the stator wires coming from the side case over here. But once you get to it, I can show you. I've got a loose plug here. This is not our stator connector, but it's the same type. So I can show you the connector here, and it looks just like this. Once you get down there with your hand to remove it, you can get your thumb on the locking tab and pull it down with your thumb, and that'll release the lock, and then you can pull the wires straight back off of the connector. So this might take you fishing around just a little bit to find it, but it is pretty simple, and it is mounted right down there. I believe on the four-seater models, it's been a while since I've installed one, but if I remember correctly, the connector is a lot more accessible because there's a bigger back panel cover, and it's not hidden below a frame rail. So get that unplugged, and that'll make it really easy to remove your side cover. So now we're going to go ahead and get the car up in the air, and we'll show you getting to work on the stator side. Alright, so now we're going to get our stator removed. I have everything loose here so I can show you what to do. The first thing you want to do, obviously we have the car jacked up in the air really high to show you clearly. You can do this very easily in your garage with a car jack, just a typical car jack, and just jack up the back passenger side of the car so you have it tilted over. And remove your tire so you have plenty of room here. Doing that will shift most of the oil over side. Most of it's in the sump anyway, so it won't leak much, but you'll get a few drips. We have the car fairly level and high up in the air, so I lost a little bit of oil, so I've got some paper towels under here. It's a good idea anyways, because you will get some drips when you separate the cover. But you won't lose much, and you can just top off what little bit you lost. There's no need to drain the oil to do this. Okay, so first thing you want to do is get your stator wires loose right at the cover. So here, you'll notice that I have been testing here, and I have a dual output stator installed. So let's just ignore the other plug. Your original one will have one connector just like this. So we've got our wires loose. You want to remove the stator cover bolts, which are 8mm bolts all the way around. They're all the same length, so there's no need to worry about keeping them separate. Get all those guys removed. Then up top here, you want to remove your ignition trigger pickup coil, which is an 8mm bolt as well. And you just remove the bolt, and this will just pop up out of the case. And then you need to remove your shifter bracket. So that has a 15mm bolt back here and a 19mm nut at the top that locks it in place. So you need to loosen this up so it can slip, your cable can slip out of the bracket, and loosen this up so the bracket can slip off of the crankcase. So once you do that and you have your pickup removed, you can slide this back on the hose and get it all out of the way. So now we have just the cover accessible. It's going to take me a minute to kind of wrestle it off. The flywheel's pretty strong on this. So let me go ahead and get this removed, and then we'll show you what it looks like. All right, so I have the stator cover loose now. There's no good way for me to show you actually removing it because I'll have my hands in the way. The flywheel is real strong, like I said a minute ago. You might have to use a screwdriver, a flat blade screwdriver, or a pry bar. You'll see that the case has these flat surfaces that are made into it specifically for that, so you can pry a little bit against it. Be really gentle. Don't pry against the gasket surface. You can kind of wedge it against the side of your crankcase and just gently pry, and you can also get your hands on it and work it like side to side a little bit. As soon as you kind of get it to break free, you can get your hands under it and pull straight out. So it's not difficult. Just take your time and be gentle, and don't scrape up your gasket surface. So I'll flip this around. Here you can see the stator installed, and we're going to put it on the bench and show you how to change it. It's just a couple of Allen head bolts here for the bracket and the stator, so it's very easy to remove. So I'm going to set this out of the way, and then we're going to talk about the flywheel. So I'm not actually going to remove the flywheel right now, and I'll tell you why. When you're changing your flywheel, unless you get a brand new one that has the one-way starter clutch assembly already bolted to the back of it, you'll find that it's a little bit tricky getting it reinstalled. Now it's not difficult, but you do just have to play with it when you're putting it back on to get it to mesh with your starter gear up here and with the woodruff key that's on the crankshaft. So it just takes a little bit of work. You kind of have to have everything lined up perfectly on the shafts here and the slot lined up for the key, and you just kind of wiggle it around until you get it straight, and then everything will slide into place. So don't be intimidated by it. I just feel like I can't give you a good shot showing that because I'll have my hands in the way just trying to get it lined up. But to remove it, it's real simple. You have a 19mm bolt here that holds the flywheel to the crankshaft. Easiest way to get this off is with an impact gun. You can just blast it off really easily. So once you have that removed, you need a puller tool. Do not try and use a 3-jaw puller. You have to use a puller tool to get this off correctly without damaging your crankshaft. RMStator sells them, and they're really easy to use. So it's reverse threaded. You'll see there's thread on the flywheel here, and there's thread on the puller. So you line it up right in the center. And again, it's reverse threaded, so you have to turn it the right way. Okay, so once you get it on, you'll tighten it up, just hand tight until it's completely engaged on the threads. Okay, and then you'll tighten your bolt until it is touching the end of the crankshaft, and then you can use an impact gun. You could use a socket if you had to, or a ratchet wrench, but it's very hard to keep the flywheel locked up, so an impact gun is best. Make sure you grease the threads really heavily because there's a lot of tension on them, and that'll help them move smoothly. And as you tighten this bolt up, it'll press against the crankshaft and just pop the flywheel right off. So once you have it on the bench, if you're installing a new flywheel, you can swap your starter clutch over. It's just a couple of Allen head bolts, or maybe 6, I don't recall, 3 on the back, and they just unbolt, and the starter clutch will just move over to your new flywheel, bolt back in place, and then you can line everything up, put it back in, and then put your bolt back into the crankshaft, tighten it all up with an impact gun, and you're good to go. So real simple to do that. And you'll see, always put a new gasket on these so they don't leak. We're going to be replacing this as well. Okay, so now we're going to go to the bench and change the stator out. All right, so here we have our side case on the bench, and we're going to show you swapping the stator out. I've already loosened the bolts. We have 5mm Allen head bolts here for the stator, and 4mm for the bracket that keeps the wires out of the way. So they're already loose. I'm going to remove these and remove the bracket, and then the stator will just lift straight up. Pull the grommet out, set it out of the way, and our new stator installs just the opposite. So I'll set the grommet in place, set the stator in place. Let me get the wires kind of routed right. And then you want to line up your mounting holes. Put your bolts back in. Make sure to use red Loctite on these so they do not come loose. I'm not going to tighten them up just yet, so I'm not doing it, but make sure you Loctite those. Put your bracket in place so it keeps the wires out of the way of the flywheel. And set those back in place, and use red Loctite on everything, tighten it all up, and that's your stator install. Make sure you clean up your gasket surface as well, so it's really nice and clean, so it seals well when you put it back on. And that's it, then it's ready to go back on the motor. All right, so now we're going to put our stator cover back on the motor. I have already cleaned up the gasket surface on the motor and on my side case. I have a new gasket in place, and you can use black RTV on both sides of the gasket. I do that a lot, but I've never had a problem with leaking on this motor, so I'm not doing it here, just using a new gasket. But if you're worried about it, just put a thin layer of black RTV sealant on both sides of your gasket, and you'll pretty much never have leaks. Okay, so I've got that in place. I'm going to get my side cover installed. So you can just kind of line it up, and you'll feel the flywheel will grab it and pull the stator into place very quickly. And then you might need to kind of wiggle it around a little bit to get everything lined up. Okay, so I'm pretty close here, and I'll get this perfect later when I put the bolts in, but I'm just showing you the rest of the steps. Route your wiring for your stator harness kind of right through here, and it'll plug in right back in your original connector location. So we're using this same clip here for 2 different videos. If you're installing a dual output stator, which I don't have in here right now, you'll obviously have 2 sets of wires and 2 connectors, and you just need to feed them through, and we'll deal with that in another step. If you are installing a stock style stator, then your wiring runs straight through there and will plug into the original connector, just where you unplugged it before. We're not going to show that because it's a very difficult shot to even see the plug. Okay, so with the side case in place, I'm going to move the shifter bracket back into place because it attaches to the stator case bolts. So I've got it slotted into place down here on the bottom bolt. I have the shifter cable dropped into the slot at the top, and you'll see that this will now line back up with 2 of the side case bolts. Then I'm going to take the pickup and drop it back into place, and it'll get its bolt tightened up back here. then you want to put your 8mm bolts back in all the way around your side case and get them tightened up. That'll draw the case in and get everything tightened up well. And then you want to make sure that you tighten up your mounting bolt for the shifter cable bracket down here and your nut, your adjustment nut for the shifter cable. Make sure you tighten those back up, or else you're not going to be shifting your car very well. So I've got all that in place. Let me get that buttoned up and then we'll move on to the next step. All right, now we're going to remove the old regulator. So we have the seat removed here so you can see where the bolts are. Here's where the regulator mounting bolts come through the frame. And this is similar on the four-seater as well. The regulator's in this behind the driver's seat underneath, kind of in the fender area. You can reach these easily with the seat removed. You can also remove the fuse box right here. Now on the four-seater, I don't know if this is the same location, but a good trick on the two-seater is remove the fuse box bolts, and you can drop this down and you can get your hand underneath to put a wrench on these to remove them. So anyways, that's how you would remove it. We're not actually going to take the regulator out here, but we're showing you where everything's located. So there's your access from the top. Now we're going to go around to the back. Okay, so now we can see we have the car up in the air here and the tire removed, so you can easily see where it's located. Here is your regulator mount. Now, one thing we want to talk about when you're removing and unplugging your old regulator is that there is actually a couple different options. You could see different regulators and different wiring connections depending on the year of your car and if it's had a recall or an upgrade from Polaris. So a lot of them, this is the very common type of regulator to see. I've got one loose right here I can show you. This is the later model regulator that was used from, I think, 2016 and on, but it was also a recall and an upgrade on older model Polarises. So you may see this. And it's mounted right here with a metal shield directly to the fender well here. Another option you might see is this, which is the older style Polaris regulator. You can see it's a lot larger housing. And there was different versions of this. They all had the same stator connector on it, which you can see here. But some had the battery side connection that would go straight to your battery and attach with ring terminals like this. Others would use a 2-pin plastic plug, which we'll show you as we unplug this over here. So just so you know, you may also have this bracket depending on the regulator you have installed. It's usually used on this regulator to offset it from the fender. So you may have a bracket to remove as well, just depends. Okay, so what you want to do when you have access back here is get the regulator unplugged, which for this upgrade style regulator, we have the older connector types, which kind of hard to see, but they're kind of stuffed back in here coming out of the wiring harness. Let's see if I can remove them here with one hand. Let me get my hand in here. Okay, so you'll see this car has actually had a recall upgrade applied, which is the later model regulator with this short intermediate harness that adapts these later style plugs over to the older style plugs, which the vehicle harness has. So there's lots of different versions. You may have this intermediate harness and the newer regulator. You may have a vehicle that has the 2 plugs, one for the stator, one for the battery side, that are built into the harness. You may have one that just has a stator connector and the battery side went directly to the battery with ring terminals, like I showed you a minute ago. So you just have to look and just decide which type you have. It'll be pretty obvious, and you just trace the wires coming off of the regulator and unplug them or go to your battery and remove the terminals. So it's not difficult. I just can't show you all the different options here other than kind of illustrating the different types of regulators. So your regulator removes easily from here. Your new one will bolt right in place. You can use the older style regulator and put it back with the bracket. You can get from RMStator, you can upgrade to the later model regulators here with the adapter harness. So there's a lot of different options to fit whatever need that you have. So anyways, that's how you remove it. This same clip is going to be shown for our dual output system, which will have a different setup. So if you do have that, just treat this as far as, pay attention as far as removing the regulator. Obviously you won't be reusing this one. But if you're just changing your regulator out, that's how you do it. That's where it's located. Very easy and simple to do. And everything just plugs right back in place like the original. All right, so anytime you do any work on your charging system, you want to test it when you're done and make sure everything's working well. We have our RMStator battery tester and charging system analyzer plugged in to our battery or attached to the battery so we can see the voltage. We're going to go ahead and start the car up. And this is a pretty powerful charging system, so we should see high 13 volts or so at idle. So, and then we'll rev it up and see that it increases a little bit. Okay, so we're seeing 14 volts at idle. That looks great. All right, so that looks awesome. So we're getting great output from our charging system. It's right where it's supposed to be. And you want to make sure you do that and you know that everything's working well and you have no strange noises coming from your stator cover or your motor. And you know, double check your wiring. Just make sure everything looks good for a nice clean install. Hey, thanks for watching our video. Make sure to like our channel and subscribe so you get the updates on our latest videos. And leave a comment. We try and keep an eye on them and answer you. And if you want to see any new videos, any particular installation videos for any of our parts, let us know because we're happy to film them for you. And we really want to encourage you guys to be able to install these parts in your own garage.